On today's episode, we have our week 8 waiver wire targets with FAAB bids after back-to-back brutal fantasy injury weekends in weeks 5 and 6. Week 7 was a little bit kinder to us, Aidan. The fantasy gods were like, all right, these guys have had enough. Well, unless you were a Bijan Robinson fantasy manager, but it was like, hey, you guys have had enough. We're not going to take Anthony Richardson from you. We're not going to take Devon Achane from you guys this week. We'll give you a bit of a breather, but there were some injuries, so we'll have to sort through that and give some recommendations off of that. This week was a brutal buy-mageddon. We saw 6 teams on a buy. In week 8, no buys. No buys.
0.
Less injuries.
Makes sense.
Let's go. But regardless, we know you, our listeners, our subscribers, the mean team. You're looking for streamers. You're looking for injury replacements. And we're going to try and parse through the best options this week for you on the waiver wire. But first, today's episode is brought to you by Underdog Fantasy. Fantasy drafts might be over, but you can still put your knowledge to the test and win cash prizes on Underdog Fantasy. Underdog Fantasy now has an exclusive offer for new customers. Not only will they double your deposit up to $100, they are offering a mystery pick'em special when you sign up using promo code RTM. All right, first things first, Aidan, we got to get through some of the injury news that have come out. For all of you at home, we are recording this Monday afternoon, 2:05-ish, 2 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, so a lot of stuff still has to come out, but we have some preliminary information on impactful injuries that we're going to have to monitor over the course of this week and throughout the rest of the fantasy season. So starting things off, Aidan, the Deshaun Watson injury, he got tested out for a concussion, didn't have a concussion. They're saying he's going to play in week 8, and they kept him out as a precaution. I don't know. We talked about this on our recap show that just dropped on the feed. If you haven't had to take a chance yet, our reactions episode's out. I'm probably not dropping Watson because he's been decent for fantasy, but weird.
Can't do that.
Weird vibes.
You can't do that.
Weird vibes, but something to monitor. I don't think I'll be starting Watson if you have him until the shoulder. We know more about it, and he's played a full game off of it, but just something to monitor with Watson and how that impacts Amari Cooper, because it greatly impacted Amari Cooper this week with PJ Walker. Another injury to keep an eye on, and it's somebody who played the entire game with the injury. It looked like Jalen Hurts got hurt last night. He was moving pretty slow in the second half. Did you see that?
Came out with a knee brace.
Came out with a knee brace on. So, again, we're probably expecting Jalen Hurts to play in week 8, but it's just something to monitor, right? Like, is he getting rest days? And I don't know. One that I think is really going to impact fantasy managers is Jerome Ford. It looks like Jerome Ford hurt his right ankle. No idea if this is of a low ankle or high ankle. I think some people that I trust on Twitter are saying this is a high right ankle sprain. You know what that means, Aidan. That's like 3 to 4 weeks. So
it's not great. At that position, you kind of got to sit out for a couple of weeks before you can actually cut or make any meaningful movement on that.
It's a bummer. Another injury too is a guy who missed about probably the whole first half last night almost, but then he played in the second half. Is Jalen Waddle? Looks like he hurt his back last night. I don't know.
Fine too.
I don't know. I don't know if he's going to miss any time.
Weird.
He did come back into the game, but sometimes we've seen this where guys come back into the game, then they sit out the next week to be precautious. I don't know. Just something to monitor with Jalen Waddle's back. Another one here that's a real bummer for me is Christian Watson. He hurt his knee, his right knee in particular. There's concern for a meniscus injury, potential MCL, potentially even a PCL situation similar to Treylon Burks. Christian Watson's had a myriad of injuries on his right leg, whether it be hamstring, meniscus, MCL. He's been through the ringer on the right side of his body. He's probably getting an MRI as we talk through this. Wouldn't be shocked if he landed on IR. Even if it isn't a severe injury, and I don't think he's tore his ACL and he's out for the whole season type situation, but even if it isn't like a meniscus tear or a meniscal injury, he's probably going to miss a game regardless. So it didn't look great. Did you see the video of it, his knee buckling?
Yeah, not a good throw. Not a good throw.
The throw killed him. He was wide open for 20 yards.
It was like the Khalil Herbert one a couple weeks ago, where like just super underthrown, kind of had to try to work back at the ball, and like the leg just got caught under him. So yeah, super unfortunate. It's like you kind of hate to see those.
Luke Musgrave, another Packer, he left left the stadium in a left ankle boot. I've read and done some research. That could have just been precautionary. They're saying it's most likely a low ankle sprain for Luke Musgrave. So he might miss next week. He might play through it. I don't know. If he has a low ankle sprain, he probably plays through it, right? I mean, that's...
Yeah, I would think so.
That's kind of the gist. And last injury piece of news, Gerald Everett. So Gerald Everett hurt his quad in the second half of that game. I'm seeing on my end that it's a mild quad strain. Are you seeing that as well?
Yeah, he didn't return. Donald Parham is definitely, gets a boost with him out.
Even then, I was, reading some stuff. It appears that if you have a mild quad strain, you might miss a week. You could probably play through it. It doesn't appear like it's going to really sink Gerald Everett too much. And we'll get to Gerald Everett a little bit later in the episode, but I have some Gerald Everett thoughts. So those are the injuries. Again, no real superstars hurt this week, which is...
Thank God.
Yeah,
dude.
we needed it. We needed
Watson's probably the biggest star out of, or I guess both Watsons.
And Ford.
Watson squared.
Ford, too. He's not a huge star, but people are counting on him now. So, we'll see. It's very TBD, but no Anthony Richardson, no A-Chains, no Justin Fields, no guys that you took super high that are getting hurt. I mean, Austin Eckler got hurt, but he ended up returning back to the game. It looked like he aggravated his ankle. It's TBD. We'll see if he practices this week and what that looks like, but he seemed fine when he went back in the game. But, something I noticed. Really quickly here, players you could drop. So the past couple weeks, each time I've said drop a player, they've actually played really well. So 2 weeks ago, I said drop Dak Prescott and Brandin Cooks. Who do you know? They have their best weeks of the year. Last week, I say, hey, you can go ahead and drop Dalton Kincaid. Yeah. I only have 2 guys here, and I'm playing it ultra conservative for you guys. I'd feel pretty comfortable dropping Zach Evans.
Yeah, it's unfortunate.
Royce Freeman seems like the clear backup to Darrell Henderson, and we'll talk a little bit more there. And then this one is really strange. In Keontae Ingram.
What the hell was that?
I don't know. I really don't know. He saw 10 attempts against the Rams and 37% of the snaps. And then against the Seahawks this week, he didn't see a single offensive snap. He only played on special teams. So
yeah, that was pretty puzzling. Yeah. They completely flipped the RB room like upside down.
No idea. I probably would move on from Keontae Ingram. I wouldn't have been super excited to roster him in the first place. It looks like our Demercado hunches were correct. So we'll talk a little bit about Demercado later on. But before we dive into the Week 8 wire and share our targets, we want to thank you for supporting the Regression to the Mean podcast. We appreciate you for listening and really joining us on this journey and being a part of the Mean team. If you haven't had the chance, we'd love it if you subscribe to this channel, liked this video, and dropped any of your questions in the comments below. We are marching towards our goal of 1,000 subscribers before the end of the season. We're at 628. Come on, we believe in the Mean team. Let's hop on board. We appreciate it. We're dropping some of the best content you can find for a smaller channel. Aidan, you ready to jump in this wire?
Let's dive in.
So if you are new to our Waiver Wire show, first off, welcome. Second, we are looking for guys that are under 35% ownership on Sleeper. If you're a veteran of these episodes, you also know that Aidan and I sometimes go over that 35% threshold because some of these guys are just too important not to go after, right? Oopsie. Aidan, let's start at running back this week. I'm going to let you go first. Who do you have as your primary target on the wire?
Yep. I feel like we should probably just say both of these guys, given they're both on the same team here. Darrell Henderson and Royce Freeman should be priority ads. Darrell Henderson is personally the one I would rather have, but given the snap share, Darrell Henderson, he's 35% owned. He started in 13% of leagues. They are playing the Dallas Cowboys, so not an ideal matchup, but he had 57% of the snaps 18 carries for 61 yards and a tutty, caught one of his 2 targets for 5 yards. Like we mentioned in our recap last night, it looked like he pretty much missed like no time at all, like completely plugged back into that offense and was exactly what I personally remember Darrell Henderson looking like in that offense. So this is one I'd rather have, but Royce Freeman's worth an ad as well. He had 43% of the snaps yesterday, 12 carries for 66 yards. So pretty efficient. That's over 5 yards a carry. Looked pretty good doing it. Both of these guys looked really strong. The Rams, their identity is definitely, it's not just playing it through the air. Like they're going to keep running the ball a ton. And these guys look more than capable filling in while Kieran Williams is out on IR. I'm not spending a ton on either one of these guys. I'd say I'm probably at, 6-8% on Darrell Henderson, and I'd probably go about half of that on Royce Freeman, depending on how high you'd rather be on Darrell Henderson. How do you feel about that backfield?
Yeah, so, and here's how it shook out last week. So you already hit on it a bit. Darrell Henderson was the clear running back one. He saw 58% of the snaps, 58% of the attempts, 38% of the routes, 7% of the targets. He had 15 expected fantasy points. He was like a top 10 fantasy role for Darrell Henderson in week 7. Royce Freeman, clear RB2, right, in this situation. Royce Freeman, 42% of the snaps, 39% of the attempts, 19% of the routes, 0% of the targets. Freeman looked better in the limited run he got. He got 12 carries and 5.5 yards per pop, which is pretty solid for Freeman. However, I think McVay really trusts Darrell Henderson. I don't know how long Kyren Williams is supposed to be out for. They're saying he's going to be back in week 12. Keeping my fingers crossed that he is. Is Kyren Williams going to have an 80% workload when he comes back? Now that we've proven that Darrell Henderson and Royce Freeman are worth getting involved, I have a feeling Darrell Henderson continues to play some sort of role throughout the rest of the season for this team. So I would prioritize Henderson over Freeman. Freeman kind of being the handcuff.
Short-term plug,
Like Freeman being like, if anything happens to Henderson, Freeman's going off, right? And this is the nature of this. Freeman needs to be on your roster. I think Darrell Henderson's someone you could start easily next week. So because of that, I think I could be happy to be a little more aggressive considering we're later in the season. And who knows if Kyren comes, there's so many variables that, we just, in week 14, it's just like, oh, Darrell Henderson's just the starting running back for the Rams. You just never know. So I'd be willing to get a little more aggressive with Henderson around like 10% of FAAB. Royce Freeman, probably like 4 or 5%.
Yeah.
Don't get too nuts here. Freeman's rostered in 26% of leagues. Darrell Henderson, 36%. I think, however, and I think we'll have to say this context though, Aidan, is you might have to get a little aggressive with Henderson if he's still out there.
People are kind of, I wouldn't say desperate, but injuries have plagued people, and you're looking for running backs anywhere you can find them. You might have to go a little more than that, depending on what your roster is and who your league mates are.
So if you're in a situation where you had Achane and you have to get through 2 more weeks of Achane being injured and you desperately need an RB2, I would be happy to get a little aggressive with Henderson, right? And Henderson's
if you've got help on the way.
That's honestly how I'd approach it. But those are the number 2. And again, Henderson 36%, Freeman rostered in, I think it was 26%. So
I had 25 on mine.
So both of those guys are worth picking up. Another guy that I think is worth picking up at running back here is Emari Demercado. So someone we highlighted 2 weeks ago, somebody who absolutely threw up a dud in week 6, and then somebody who just had a phenomenal role in week 7 against the Seahawks. So Demercado and Williams were the only running backs to get a snap on this offense. Ingram, who led the team in rushes in week 6, again, only played on special teams. His role, 80% of the snaps, 52% of the attempts, 56% of the routes, 14% of the targets, 13 expected fantasy points. Good luck trying to figure out this running back room while James Conner's out, but we now have 2 weeks of Demercado being good. So the way it's looking at us, right, he needs to be the guy you roster, in my opinion. At 20% rostered, a lot of people dropped him after that dud he had in week 6. I would scoop him back up. What are your thoughts on Demercado?
Yeah, I'm just confused what happened in week 6 and why he got no run and Ingram did, and then it completely flipped. So I'm not comfortable starting any of them
No.
personally. If I had to roster one of them, it'd be Demercado, 5% max. Just the usage is puzzling. Like, who knows? Maybe it flips again. Like, I doesn't really make any like it. Ingram didn't look bad in week 6 by any means too. Like, it's not like, he got his touches and looked awful. Like, he looked fine. He looked pretty serviceable. And then you give this guy 80% touches like out of nowhere. It doesn't really make sense what they're doing in the backfield. And James Conner, he could be back in 2 weeks. So it's like, don't get crazy here, but this is probably the guy you want.
Yeah. Any other running backs that you're looking to add?
Yeah, Pierre Strong,
Yeah, Pierre Strong
absolutely
too.
worth a look here. Yeah, with Jerome Ford out, I wouldn't be surprised if he lands on the IR, to be completely honest. With that high ankle sprain. Obviously, Kareem Hunt looked pretty good. He's rostered, I think it was around 70% of leagues. This is the only other running back that touched the ball on Sunday once he went out with injury. Looked fine, 8 carries for 25 yards. Obviously, didn't get a whole lot of looks, but this is probably going to be, like your early down running back, whereas we kind of know what Kareem's Hunt's role is. He's, pretty consistently the third down back, normally around there in the red zone as well. But yeah, Pierre Strong's worth the flyer. Like, I'd rather have Pierre Strong than Demercado probably. I think I know with more certainty what Pierre Strong's role is going to be versus Demercado. So I would probably prioritize him behind the 2 Rams running backs and then Demercado last.
I like Pierre Strong. We still don't know the status, right, of Ford's ankle injury. I think IR would make sense.
It's gonna be a couple
I wouldn't be
weeks.
shocked.
Yeah,
I think Hunt's going to be the starter, but
for sure.
again, I don't think they envision Kareem Hunt as a bell cow, right? And I think him coming off the couch as of like 3 weeks ago, I don't think they want to just run him into the ground. Like, this is a team that wants to go to the playoffs and make a run, right? So I think they're going to
Yep.
need, I can't believe I'm saying this, a healthy Kareem Hunt to do. This is such a weird year.
I don't even they envisioned it. Like, they didn't want
Yeah,
him to start with.
but
Here we are.
I'm just shocked how good Kareem Hunt looks. Like, he was dust ball last year, and he looks like a way better player this season, much fresher, more athletic.
Yeah,
But I think
no,
they want
he
to
looks good.
keep that same punch, and I think the only way you do that is not by giving him a ton of touches. I think you have to kind of mix him in. So wouldn't be shocked if this is like a 50-50 Strong Hunt split. I really
agree.
wouldn't. And I think the high value touches are going to go to Hunt in the red zone, which we want. But Pierre Strong is definitely somebody that should be picked up. 4% rostered. I think he's definitely. I don't know if you can start him right away, but I definitely think you wait a couple weeks, and you might get an idea of like what his role is going to be, or at least 1 week. Oh my goodness, I was going to have Keaton Mitchell as a recommendation, but he hurt his hamstring. I'm in shambles. No,
That's tough.
he's week to week. Oh, this is brutal. Yeah, don't go pick up Keaton Mitchell. He has a hamstring injury.
Last one I
Oh,
had is
jeez.
it. They're both cheating. They're on the same team. I would go look at Deontay Foreman and Roschon Johnson in your leagues. See if either one are available. Roschon is likely to be cleared on Wednesday. Finally, I don't know why it took 3 weeks, but Roschon is back. This is a Bears team that just averaged just under 5 yards a carry and is playing a pretty poor Los Angeles Chargers rush defense this Sunday. I don't know what the split would look like if they're both healthy. Obviously, we just saw Deontay Foreman go for RB1, but they are super high on Roschon. So it's more so just go take a look. If those guys are on your waiver wire, absolutely put in some claims on them.
Roschon at 59%, Foreman at 63%. They're probably owned, but
Probably owned, but
definitely go
yeah,
snag them.
people may have given up on Roschon given he hasn't really done anything and was injured.
Last one here, and he's probably owned in the leagues you play in, but just a quick shout out to Ezekiel Elliott, who's rostered in 50% of leagues. This backfield's basically a 60-40 split now between Mondre and Zeke. Mondre remains the premier option in fantasy, considering what he does as a pass catcher. Mondre just had a 20% target rate in week 7, but Zeke had 2 more carries in this one over Ramondre, and he scored another touchdown in a goal-to-goal situation. Zeke is just somebody you should have on your roster. He's basically like a Jaylen Warren type at this point, and you can definitely start him in a pinch because he gets goal line work, and he's going to get like 12 to 13 carries a game. So probably rostered at 50%. I wouldn't get too crazy with FAAB really for any of these guys. I think Pierre Strong, you have a decent bid here at like 5%. Zeke maybe like 3%, 5% rest of season value, but none of these guys are really, changing your life, maybe outside of Darrell Henderson for the next 2 or 3 weeks.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. That's it for running back. It's not very exciting.
It's not great.
Yeah, but we got to, we got to put our hard hats on and get our lunch pails and go to work, baby. Fantasy doesn't
Someone's got to do it.
Stop for anybody here. Moving on to wide receivers, I think a popular name is going to be Josh Downs. Josh Downs is rostered in 52% of leagues. We've been banging the Josh Downs drum for a couple weeks now, but he's gone over 13 fantasy points in 4 of his last 5 games. He's the clear wide receiver 2 in this offense. He's probably not out there, but if he's out there, he had a mega performance against the probably toughest matchup that you could have as a wide receiver against the Browns secondary. Go pick up Josh Downs. Like that's an easy one.
Yeah, I had him too. Another guy we've been talking about too that had another really good week is Kendrick Bourne. He had 2 really good weeks out of 6 before coming into this week. Put together a really nice performance. His last 2 weeks, 10 of 11 targets for 89 yards, just under 20 points. This week followed up 6 of 7 for 63 yards and a tutty. 16 points, looks to be the clear wide receiver 1 in that offense. Mac Jones is starting to look slightly better. Don't look now. Mac Jones is starting to look at least, competent at the quarterback position. And, he's the top receiving option and he's dirt cheap. So, he should be owned more than 39% in my opinion.
When Kendrick Bourne has played over 80% of the snaps this season, he has averaged 16.5 fantasy points per game. So you can see here on the screen.
Just play him.
I think some of these are impacted by blowouts, right? But when he is playing, he is doing well. He clearly has built a rapport with Mac Jones. And over the past 3 weeks, he has been the wide receiver 20. So he's pretty much locked and loaded flex play at this point with bye weeks and injuries. Not a sexy name, but should be on your rosters. And at 39%, that should be more like 50 to 55% in my opinion on Sleeper.
Yeah.
What are you bidding on Bourne? Like 8%?
Yeah, it depends what your wide receiver room looks like. Like, I don't know. Yeah, 8-10%. If you're really desperate,
you could start him like in a pinch, dude. Like, which is super.
And valuable. If you're in a deep league, like some of the leagues we're in, like where you have 3 wide receivers plus 2 flexes, like you're probably starting Kendrick Bourne at this point. So
probably
8, but you could talk me into 15, 20, depending on what your roster looks like. And if you need help, there's a lot worse options right now than Kendrick Bourne on the waiver wire at this point of the year.
Matchups against Miami, Washington, and
they just got toasted.
And Indy.
Yeah.
I mean, those are all pretty decent spots for him.
I don't hate it.
Another guy that I have here is Jayden Reed, who's somebody that I've called out pretty much every other week here. So Christian Watson's probably going to miss time. This Packers offense is dreadful, right? But Reed is able to get open. He's shown pretty decent rapport with Jordan Love so far this season. He's scored 9 or more fantasy points in 4 out of 6 games, and he's been relatively consistent even though his snaps and looks and targets haven't. He's a priority ad for me this week. We don't know what's going to happen with Watson, but I'm willing to go 10 to 12% on Jayden Reed, considering that Watson may be missing time, and then all of a sudden he's clearly the number 2 again. They have matchups against Minnesota, the Rams, Steelers, Chargers, Detroit. These are all teams that have gotten beaten by wide receivers. So Reed is the type of rookie that breaks out in the second half of years typically. So that's why I'd be aggressive with Reed. He's rostered in 26% of sleeper leagues.
You'd rather have Jayden Reed than Kendrick?
Depends. So am I really trying to paper over injuries? And really I'm week to week trying to win every single game because someone's on IR or I'm dealing with issues, right? Then I'd probably go Kendrick Bourne. If you're a loaded contender and you're trying to stack up for a stretch run in the fantasy playoffs, Jayden Reed has that type of profile where he's just going bananas in the fantasy playoffs.
Yeah, that's fair.
So I'd probably say for week 8, Kendrick Bourne is more valuable. for the second half of the season, I think I'd like Jayden Reed more for upside.
Yeah, that's a fair analysis.
Who else you got at wide receiver?
It's kind of rough out there. One I just wanted to flag, I don't know if I'm rostering him yet, is OBJ quietly actually had a pretty good week. 39% roster, 13% started. Caught 5 of his 7 targets for 49 yards, which, again, it doesn't, scream off the sheet there, but, it is his best output of the year. Age 30, he's pretty removed from, fantasy relevance, for lack of better words. But you've got to acknowledge what he did this week. Lamar looks like he's just on an absolute tear. He's playing at an MVP level, and OBJ could potentially be a beneficiary. Obviously, we think Zay Flowers and Mark Andrews are the top 2 options in that passing offense, but who knows? Maybe there's a world where OBJ starts carving into that target share and starts pushing Zay Flowers for some of those touches. So someone more just to put on your radar if you've got a deep bench or just ready to cut ties with someone. It's not an awful roster, less than 5% for sure. This isn't someone I'm really going after aggressively, but it's worth noting what he did last week compared to his body of work the rest of the season.
7 targets, you love to see that, and you're basically betting on this passing offense getting better throughout the rest of the season. I think it's a dart throw. I think both him and Bateman are interesting.
They both looked competent again.
Yeah. Kind of on the exact opposite side of the spectrum here in terms of a player to target
the other one I had, actually.
On the wire is Jalin Hyatt. So he's rostered in 14% of leagues. The sample size is still small with Hyatt, but his snaps, his routes, his targets, and his production continues to kind of taper up and grow week in and week out. He turned in his best game as a pro this week against the Commanders, posting 2 catches for 75 yards and 9.75 fantasy points. This is coming after a 4-target, 21-catch game. He had a big catch against the Bills, called back in Week 6. He remains a bench stash, right? He's highly volatile. Most of his targets are coming on deep shots. That's really how he's being utilized right now. But he continues to make splash plays, and he clearly brings juice to this offense, and he's less of a developmental receiver than I think he's gotten credit for since he's came into the league so far. And I would just get him on your bench before he breaks out. That's really how I'd approach Hyatt.
Yeah, the snap share to start with is really encouraging. Yeah. It's, I was wrong on Paris Campbell. I was wrong on some of the other wide receivers on offense that just kind of aren't doing anything for them. And it feels like they've kind of gotten a group of wide receivers out there that are giving them some better looks and just overall better options. So yeah, Jalin Hyatt was actually the last guy that I had on my list as well.
One last one, too, that I wanted to call out, and I said to drop him 2 weeks ago, is Brandin Cooks. So Brandin Cooks is rostered in 49% of leagues. So I told you to drop Cooks before he posted his best outing of the season on Monday night against the Chargers. Now, that might just be a product of playing the Chargers because the Chargers defense stinks. But I will tell you this. He actually looked fast. And if Brandin Cooks still looks fast, Brandin Cooks is going to be on the field. And if he still has his speed, I think he's going to see looks. So he's coming out of the bye. He should be healthier. He now has more time to gel with Dak Prescott. And on top of all of this, I think a bet on Cooks makes sense because it's a bet against Michael Gallup. And boy, Michael Gallup in Week 6 against the Chargers had a 33% target share on 10 targets and was only able to cash in on 5 fantasy points. I don't know, man. I think Gallup might be cooked. It looked like Gallup was showing signs of life 2 to 3 weeks ago. We highlighted it on this podcast. I feel like one of these guys has to emerge, right? Right? I don't know.
Someone has to.
Right?
Someone has to.
Yeah.
They're going to start getting in more favorable game scripts where, they have to throw the ball, and, it's not just going to be the CeeDee Lamb show. One of these guys is going to be real. I would bank on Cooks as well, personally. That was my pick at the beginning of the season. As we saw against the Chargers, actually looked pretty solid. So we're hoping coming out of the bye, he can build on that with Dak.
Yeah, but still, his big game, 4 for 36 and a touchdown. So I don't know. That offense might just suck.
We'll take it. Yeah, we'll take it for now.
And then again, a deep stash is Demario Douglas, Pop Douglas, rookie out of Liberty here. This is you playing a deep league. If you're in Scott Fishbowl, something like that. When this guy's on the field, this Patriots offense looks pretty good. So I'll leave it at that. I don't think we need to get too into the weeds, but he played his most snaps of the year. He had 6 targets, 4 catches, 54 yards. He looks pretty dynamic out there. He's more of like a kick returner type guy, but Pop Douglas in deeper leagues, go check him out. I think the number one headliner on waivers this week is Kyler Murray.
Yeah.
And I think the news came out that Kyler Murray was going to be active last week. So odds, I mean, he got activated off the pup. I think it became pretty clear that Kyler was going to get picked up in a lot of leagues. We haven't had a chance to record since talking about Kyler Murray getting activated. It's looking like he's going to be back by week 9 or week 10. Sounds like he's auditioning to remain the Cardinals franchise QB. It sounds like he's making a push to play after a kind of a poor narrative has come out about him, his work ethic. Does he like football? And it sounds like he's really driven to prove people like me wrong, right? In terms of, I said, I don't think he's really that interested in coming back this year. And, Kyler's fantasy production wasn't awesome last year before he got hurt, but that offense was a joke. I really like what they've done so far with Drew Petzing as their offensive coordinator, and I think Kyler would do super well in that system. He's a lottery ticket. Like, don't get your expectations too high, right? But this is Kyler freaking Murray. If you lost Anthony Richardson and you're looking for that spark down the stretch, Kyler Murray, he could provide it, right? So I'm pretty in on Kyler, at least in just a dart throw. What do you think about him? Do you think he's going to do anything this year?
I think so.
Okay.
Kyler went healthy, dude. He's a top 5, top 10 fantasy QB most weeks. Like these QBs that obviously have like that like rushing floor, it's just like, it's an extra 5, 10 points every week. Look at this guy, man. When he's on, he's on.
I need it so bad.
Good players around him. Like we've seen Josh Dobbs look competent in that offense. I think Kyler Murray is only going to take them, levels higher. So no, I completely agree. I was able to scoop up Kyler in 2 leagues where I was QB needy, and feeling pretty good about it. Yeah, we were a little wrong about him in terms of
I was.
Is he going to play? How soon was he going to play? Like he could be like fully ramped up, fully rust off for like a fantasy football playoff run for you. What are his matchups later in the year? Actually, just out of curiosity.
Later in the year, he's playing. So if he plays week 10, he's playing against Atlanta, Houston, the Rams, Pitt, San Francisco, Chicago, Philadelphia, and Seattle. So, I mean, nothing like Swiss cheese, but nothing like he's playing the 85 Bears every week. Like,
yeah.
They've already played San Francisco, so he already mailed in one of his worst matchups, right? And Seattle, he won't have to play Seattle twice. He won't have to play the Rams twice, right? Or do they ask? He has to play the Rams twice. It looks like. Is that it? No. So that's fine. I mean,
no, just once.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, I would get decently aggressive if you need a QB, even if you just got kind of average QB play. I'm probably at what 15, 20,
dude,
depending on what your quarterback room looks like.
I get super aggressive with Kyler. If you're rolling out like Geno Smith and Sam Howell like I am to replace Richardson, luckily I swooped up Kyler for free, but I mean like 15 to 20%. Like get aggressive.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too.
Aggressive. Yep. And then all the other receivers, I don't think we hit FAAB bid, but like probably maybe Cooks, you do like 3%.
Low on all
Hyatt, you probably don't have to put a bid down. Jayden Reed, we already talked about getting a little aggressive there, like maybe 10 to 12%. And then Kendrick Bourne probably in the same range. And then the other quarterback I had was just Desmond Ridder. Other quarterback I have is Desmond Ridder.
Have him.
I know there's a lot of hate with Desmond Ridder, but he's a bit of a turnover machine, right? But
that's an understatement.
He's thrown for 300. He's thrown for 250 yards 3 weeks in a row. He has 3 rushing TDs on the year. If he doesn't fumble that ball on the literal 1-inch line, he finishes with another top 12 QB finish. His next 4 weeks are at Tennessee versus Minnesota, at Arizona. Bye. That's a pretty soft schedule for Desmond Ridder in like 2 QB leagues, super flex. Like Ridder's sneaky. But I know people hate him, so
I'm not touching him. I'd rather have Gardner Minshew, I think.
Oh, jeez. Ridder's rostered in 20% of leagues. Kyler is rostered in 49%. And Gardner Minshew is rostered in 13% of leagues. So that's your poo-poo platter at quarterback this week. All right, tight end. You're ready to redeem yourself. Who are we picking up? at tight end this week?
Dalton Kincaid is a top priority. Just before we started recording, it was announced that Dawson Knox is actually getting wrist surgery.
Whoa.
Timeline to return is TBD. Dalton Kincaid also just like exploded out of nowhere. Like, this is kind of what we thought he could be this year. Dude caught all 8 of his targets, 75 yards. Like, this was awesome. The guy was like the offensive weapon that I feel like they, were quoting him as, like, kind of positionless, and it was awesome. Dawson Knox missing time too. Like, this is a clear tight end one in that offense now. Could potentially be the number 2, option in general behind Stephon Diggs. Gabe Davis is forever going to be Gabe Davis. Well, he's never really going to seize what's right in front of him, and that's fine. Dalton Kincaid, especially at that onesie position, I'd be fairly aggressive if you've got a crap tight end, or even to like, this guy could be flexible, man. This is someone I'm super excited about after watching him this week, with the combination of the Dawson Knox injury.
I had no idea Dawson Knox got hurt. Basically, every time that Kincaid is playing, when Dawson Knox isn't playing, Kincaid looks pretty good. As you can see here, 41% rosters. It's a little bit over our 35% threshold, but 8 targets, 75 yards. You're going to take that every day of the week.
1,000% at the tight end position. I think he was tight end 6 on the week.
Another guy I recommended dropping last week.
Oh, yeah. What do we have?
Oh, geez, spoiled milk. I have 2 other tight ends. Did you have anything else at tight end?
I have one more.
Do you have Taysom too?
I have Taysom. He only shows up when Alvin Kamara is healthy, dude. Look at does nothing for the first 5 weeks, and of course the last 2 weeks double digit.
Like the
man,
Cape
he's
Crusader.
such a rat.
Jeez. Okay, so here's the deal. Over the past 2 weeks, not only has Taysom continued to have his little like running back package that he has, where he's commanding goal line touches as a rushing quarterback. He also has the 3rd highest target share of any Saint over the past 2 weeks, which is just fucking crazy. He has a 15% target share. If he is seeing 5 targets per game plus his work at the goal line as a rushing quarterback, he's a must roster player. I mean, that's like kind of a perfect role you'd want for like your coin flip tight end. It's kind of insane. He's scored 12 points and 16 points in back-to-back weeks. If it becomes pretty clear that his 8 target, 5 target games where he's being used as a pass catcher, if that goes away and he's losing the legit tight end work, I mean, you drop him really quickly. But if it's staying consistent that he's going to get targets this season plus that rushing role, you have to have him on your team. And it's like a real sicko thing to say, but I think it's just the truth.
Yeah, it probably has helped a little bit too that Juwan Johnson has been out the last 3 games.
Good point.
But it just feels like he's just always going to be a Kamara pest. It's like every time you're inside the 5, you're like, oh, finally, Kamara patered after he caught 4 catches this drive. Incorrect. Taysom Hill direct snaps. It's so annoying. But like, again, at the tight end position, it's such like slim pickings a lot of times where if you can get 10 a game from your tight end and Taysom Hill, like, you have to acknowledge it. Like, he's kind of a cheat code given the position he actually plays and where you can put him in fantasy.
So Kincaid, how much FAAB would you drop on Kincaid?
Oh, Kincaid? Dude, I'm probably like, I would go to like 15 potentially.
Okay. How much FAAB on
I'm
Taysom?
pretty high on him. Taysom, I'm probably like half that.
Okay.
Like 7, like 5.
Last guy I have here is Gerald Everett, even though he's a bit banged up. He's been a big beneficiary of the Mike Will injury. He's 3rd in target share, 3rd in first read targets. Since the injury, he's actually gotten the workload that we all thought Austin Eckler would get. He's cleared double-digit fantasy points in back-to-back weeks. We'll monitor the quad injury. It doesn't appear to be too serious. But he's rostered 25% of leagues. If he's playing, he has a pretty damn good role as a tight end. Back-to-back double-digit fantasy points. So point weeks. What would you have a bid on Gerald Everett?
Oh man, that's not very high for me. I'd probably be around 5 with Taysom. Okay. I'm probably about equal on both of them. I'm not dying to pick up either one, but like you can get contributions from them both. Yeah.
What if Everett was healthy?
I'm probably still around the
Okay.
same as Taysom, maybe
Okay.
barely higher, but yeah, it's like I don't know. What do you think?
If I knew that Gerald Everett was healthy, I'd have him above Taysom.
Yeah,
It just seems like
probably have more Taysom,
he has a
but not
locked
by
in role.
much.
He has a locked in role with Mike Will out.
Yeah. If if Kincaid's 15 and Taysom's 5, I don't think I'm more than like 8 or
8.
10 on Everett.
But I think you
Yeah,
could rank him as a top 12 guy rest of the season,
yeah,
which is
yeah,
pretty valuable. I think it's one of those guys where you won't have to play tight end roulette, or it's like you can put him in your lineup and feel decent about it. Kincaid's
yeah.
really
Like you're not
interesting.
going to get a goose egg.
Kincaid's
You're not going to
really
get a goose egg.
interesting. But that's it.
I'm very
Yeah, that's it for the waiver episode. Me and team. We appreciate you for tagging along. If you have any start sit decisions, we're dropping a rankings episode throughout the week. We're going to have wide receivers. We're going to have running backs. We're going to have tight ends. We're going to have defensive streamers. That's why no defensive streamers in this episode. We're going to cover it a little bit later in the week. Drop your questions and comments down in the comments below. If you have waiver wire specific questions on who to drop, we're here to help. Aidan, before we jump, any other things you got to tell the mean team, listeners at home?
I got nothing today. Just feel free to keep roasting us. Feel free to keep sending us your starts and decisions. We love interacting with you guys, so keep sending them away.
Go Niners. He didn't say it. Jeez. Okay. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Until next time. I thought you were going to say go Niners.